for me? Oh, already on top of it. Thank you so much. So welcome everybody. We're going to get officially started here. Welcome to our next California Advancing PREA office hour session with a focus on letter writing. For those of you who may be joining us for your first office hour session, these, for the most part, are monthly 1-hour sessions we host on different topics related to PREA. Sometimes we'll invite some RCC, Rape Crisis Center members to come in and co-facilitate with us, but today it'll just be our Valor and JDI team. We're really excited to welcome y'all here. We really hope our workshop will help you gain confidence in providing meaningful emotional support through letter writing. We're going to discuss some basics of letter writing, offer some tips, and then jump into small groups to really work together on how to respond to some example letters, really get you that practical skills. We also want to acknowledge that letter writing can be a tricky transition from hotline calls and in-person programming. I know once I started writing letters, it took me a little bit to adjust, so we want to remind y'all to be gentle with yourself as well. So whether you have written letters for years or you're just starting writing letters, we welcome you into the space today. And I'm really excited to kick off our introductions for our facilitation team today. My name is Taylor Miller. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a project coordinator here with Valor US. I'll pass it over to Edward to introduce himself.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. I'm Edward Cervantes. I'm a senior program officer at Just Attention International. He, him pronouns. Yeah, I've been responding to letters for a long time, so happy to answer any questions at the end.
And hello, everyone. I'm Marcela Rojas. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the project managers here at Valor. And yes, also have been responding to letters for a few years now. So here to support y'all during the training and then afterwards too. And then I'll pass it to Jessica.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Seipel. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior program director with Just Attention International. And I'll just echo what everyone else has said. I'm really excited to be here and want to be able to support you all any way we can.
Thank you so much, team. We have lots of professional letter writers in the mix. So I'm excited for that. And we'll move into a little bit of what you can expect from today. I feel confident that most of you know how to use Zoom, but I'll briefly walk you through what you can expect from our session. We have a short presentation for y'all, and then we'll be spending most of our time in small groups just to have a little bit more intimate conversations. We really encourage you to utilize the chat feature today or jump off mic and really just participate. Again, this space is for you. We want you to be able to ask any questions you have or speak to any challenges you have around letter writing. Again, for folks who haven't introduced themselves in the chat, let's get that chat going again. Introduce yourself, your name, your pronoun, what agency you're from, and also your location. Are you in California? Are you out of California? We just want to see who is in the room with us today. So we're excited to welcome you all. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Valor, I'll speak a little bit about us and our mission. So Valor US, formerly known as the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, is committed to preventing and ending sexual violence by advancing equity and eradicating oppression. We provide leadership, vision, and resources to rape crisis centers, individuals, and other entities committing to ending sexual violence. Ultimately, we envision a world free from violence where the dignity of every person is valued and respected. I'll let Edward take it over now to talk a little bit about JDI and their mission.
Hey, yeah, JDI is a health and human rights organization that seeks to end sexual abuse in all forms of detention. JDI's core goals are to work together with corrections officials, rape crisis centers, and policymakers to make detention facilities safe, to change public attitudes about sexual abuse behind bars, and to ensure that survivors get the help that they need. It is JDI's fundamental belief that when the government takes away someone's freedom, they take on the absolute responsibility to protect that person's safety. No matter what crime someone has committed, rape is not part of the penalty. California Advancing PREA is a partnership between JDI and Valor that's funded by the California Office of Emergency Services, or CalOES. Through this collaboration, we hope to provide local rape crisis centers with the resources and support that they need to establish and then provide a full range of services to incarcerated survivors in our state.
Thank you so much, Edward. Also, I just want to thank everybody for introducing themselves. I love seeing some familiar faces and also lots of new people. So that's so exciting. I want to run through a few of our objectives for today. Our first objective is we want to determine ways to assess the needs of incarcerated survivors via letter correspondence. Next, we want to be able to provide strategies to build rapport, trust, and ongoing advocacy to incarcerated survivors. And lastly, we're hoping to describe the resources and healing materials available to address incarcerated survivors' needs. So that's what we have on the agenda for y'all. And we want to kick it off by actually jumping into some breakout sessions. We're going to have you in these breakout groups for around 8 minutes. And we just want to have you give you a space where you could address these questions, talk to each other so we can talk about how you navigate letter writing and any challenges that may come up. After we do the 8 minutes, we'll jump back into a large group and maybe ask a few people to share what they spoke about. But in the meantime, Marcella will be putting us in those breakout groups and we'll be ready to chat about these questions.
Okay, did you want 3 or 4? We have 26, 25 people.
I think 3 is fine.
Okay.
3 is good. We'll do the 3. And each group will have a member from JDI or Valor in there to help facilitate these.
Let me make sure that's true, the way that it's assigned.
Okay.
So Edward,
Ideally.
Jessica, don't accept if you see. Okay, Edward, I'm moving you to group 1. So there we go. Okay, I'm going to open the rooms now, and then I will send the questions to you all.
Lovely.
And see you back at what time? 5 minutes. Okay, probably 5 minutes. Jessica, did you get something pop up for you? Okay. Everybody's gone.
And thank you for adding a little bit of what you heard. I know within my group, we talked about like the time frame that happens between sending letters versus when they receive it and versus when you receive responses is very different from traditional advocacy and crisis intervention. So I love that we talked a little bit about that. Anything else that folks brought up?
Sounds like every group had different things. Our group talked a lot about when you receive a letter that just asks for a lot of different things that we might not be qualified or capable of responding to. And just navigating that and setting boundaries and establishing what we can and can't do.
I love that. Your group's getting a little bit ahead of the game here. I know we're going to talk about that in the slide. So that's so, honestly, I love hearing what different groups talk about. But I will let Marcella share the slides so we can jump back into our presentation. We'll have plenty of space for y'all to continue this conversation, continue asking your questions. Really encourage you as we go through these slides, put questions in the chat or pause us if needed. But I'm going to jump right in and talk a little bit about what you can expect with letters. And as we covered, it sounds like in some of our groups, you can expect a lot of different things. Letters can vary widely in length. Some letters may be really short or just be a single sentence, such as, hey, can you send me a list of your services or add me to your mailing list? And on the other hand, other letters may stretch over many pages. As we know, that active writing can really be a form of processing and self-soothing for survivors. For long letters, I personally find it really helpful to take notes on important things to address when drafting a response as I go through. And remember to take your time. There's no immediate rush to pull together a response. We want to be thoughtful and personal, and that's a little bit different from traditional crisis intervention. We also know that letters may include legal documents and other paperwork. So you want to think about how you may store that at your agency and just sort through those as a whole. In regards to disclosing abuse, we know that some letters may not directly disclose abuse or sexual harassment at all. Others may allude to it, but not state it directly. Others may hide it in the middle of different topics. And on the other hand, some may immediately disclose it, but not really be interested in that emotional support and looking for more of legal or institutional advocacy. We want to just remember that it may be really difficult for folks to trust your agency enough to disclose it. So you want to make sure that you're reminding them of your role and what services you can provide. You also may receive letters where the handwriting is a little bit difficult to read or understand, or it may be in a different language than English. So you want to have some plans in place of how you're going to translate the letter and also translate a response. And a general note that we like to offer is we encourage you to stay alert and just listen and keep track of different trends and experiences that might be issues that you want to bring up next time you connect with your facility contact. So those are some things we can expect. I'm going to pass it over to Edward to talk a little bit about some tips.
Thank you, Taylor. So yeah, we want to offer you some tips in regards to the more practical aspects of letter writing. First, you'll want to respond with consistent timing and take no more than 2 to 3 business days. In regards to the length, as you would with any letter, right? You don't want it to be longer than 1 or 2 pages. Although they might send you something that's much longer, your response should be limited to that. Also ensuring to use accessible language and font. We recommend that you use an easy to read font, size 14. As much as possible, we encourage you to match the writing of the survivor. But when you don't know their level of education, keep it at a 6th grade reading level and always aim for clarity. As Taylor mentioned, the great thing about providing support via letter is that you can take your time, and the survivor then has the opportunity to read your words carefully and turn to them again and again when they need a reminder that someone believes them and cares about their well-being. At the same time, there's no need to overthink your responses. You're experts at this, so you know how to do it. Just be thoughtful and remember the power of validating their experiences and making clear that the abuse was not their fault. You'll want to come up with some template language about your agency as well as your role as an advocate. Let them know who you are and what you can and can't do. Consider any additional information about limitations or confidentiality that you think should be included in your initial response. Maintaining a survivor-centered approach means an investment in earning the survivor's trust by leaving assumptions behind, acknowledging that the survivor is the expert in their journey, and offering options rather than making decisions for them. It's also important that any personal biases about incarcerated survivors be identified and challenged. Those feelings are normal, but our job is to provide services to all survivors. Okay, so when actually responding, we recommend that you start by skimming the entire letter and getting a general sense of the type of support that the survivor is looking for. Then you can go over it more carefully and make note of each thing that needs to be addressed. Are there specific safety concerns that require more immediate action? Are there trauma symptoms that need to be normalized, coping skills that you can offer, or resources to include? With these notes, you can create a simple outline to ensure that you're responding to all of the relevant portions of the survivor's letter. And then you'll want to ask about their personal approaches to safety planning, coping mechanisms, self-care, and offer only approaches that would be relevant to their current circumstances. Since you're not going to know everything, you should ask for clarifying questions if necessary, while mirroring their language, the language that they use to describe their experiences, sorry. If applicable, you can offer reporting options while explaining that it's their decision whether they report or not, and reminding them that your services are not dependent on that. The goal is to provide ongoing care. So you'll want to build rapport and trust by being honest, consistent, and caring. Treat letters the same way you would treat a hotline call or a one-on-one session. As I mentioned earlier, the cool part about letters is that you have the opportunity to edit yourself and include those things that you wish that you'd said on a hotline call or in person, because we always think about that later. As a best practice, you'll want to ask questions to invite an ongoing communication. And of course, you should thank the survivor for writing to you. Acknowledge the courage it takes to reach out for help and let them know that you're looking forward to their response and that you're available for additional support.
Thank you so much, Edward. Honestly, those tips were amazing. We do have a handout that we'll share with you at the end that has those tips all together because I noticed some folks are taking notes, which is so lovely. So we'll make sure to get that to you. And yeah, one of my favorite things that Edward said is really you can be so intentional. That's what I love about letter writing. It's such an intentional form of advocacy. And I saw Marcella just put the handout in the chat. So thank you for doing that. But I want to talk a little bit now and shift gears to setting boundaries. As we know, setting boundaries are really important to any part of advocacy that we do. As we begin to provide our clients with ongoing support via letter writing, we're going to want to continue setting these clear boundaries. We know that often professional relationships are often time-bound, have really distinct roles and responsibilities and some structures. So as an advocate, you'll have the opportunity to maintain that boundary and guide that advocate and client relationship. Doing so will hopefully allow your client to learn how to mirror your boundary setting with you. And although your client may not always explicitly focus on the abuse or harassment they've experienced, which is very similar to when we're on hotline calls, they may focus on other topics related to their recovery and healing. So co-creating really flexible goals for your client from the beginning can help you stay on track. And we want to also acknowledge and celebrate when those goals have been met and when new goals are being created organically. So celebrate those wins when they come. We know how important that is in a survivor's healing journey. We also want to be really cautious about disclosing personal stories as a way to connect with our clients or illustrate a specific point. If you notice yourself slipping or your boundaries have changed, you can always step back, reflect internally, and ask yourself questions about what's changed, considering what is it about this situation that is making me overstep my boundaries or making me need to reset my boundaries. And then really just think over your options and remember, what are you going to do about this situation? How are you going to fix it? And what do you have control over? Our boundaries can always be changing. We just want to make sure that we're aware of them. Also, we want to acknowledge that because you may discuss personal, traumatic, and abusive experiences about their life, it's important to still maintain that advocate-client relationship and not turn it into a personal one. But that doesn't mean that we can't be friendly, thoughtful, and empathetic in all of our responses. And lastly, we want to maintain consistent, firm, and fair boundaries. And we mentioned this before, and we mention it in almost all of our presentations. We want to make sure that we're being really clear about what our role is and the limitations to our role as an advocate, and be really transparent about how we can provide advocacy and how we can't. We never want to overpromise anything to any of our clients. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're unsure of how to respond to certain questions or experiences, reach out to one of your team members if you have a team member. And if not, you can always reach out to our PREA team. Our JDI team and our Valor team are always ready to support y'all through any of the advocacy process. Yeah, so that's a little bit about that. And I'm going to pass it over back to Edward to talk a little bit about healing resources.
Cool. Yeah, so as we mentioned before, you'll want to provide resources that are relevant to the survivor in their current setting. So, for example, it might not be possible to help a survivor come up with a plan to avoid a perpetrator in a detention setting since they have little control over their housing. So you'll want to come up with an alternate plan and let them lead the way. They know how to keep themselves safe. Also, if the perpetrator is a staff or a gang member, reporting might not be a safe option for the survivor. Just as going to the police for some communities can be more harmful than helpful. If your agency has an established relationship with the PREA coordinator or somebody else at the facility, you may be able to advocate for the survivor to be transferred to a different unit or facility. That's why it's important to build those relationships with each facility that you serve. But before reaching out to anybody, be sure that you have the survivor's permission to do so and that they understand the risks involved. Since the outcome of your advocacy isn't guaranteed, avoid making any promises and make sure to be realistic. When providing referrals to outside organizations, you'll want to do a little research to make sure that the organization actually does work with people who are incarcerated. Many do not. And something that we hear all the time is that it's a constant source of frustration. People reach out, they don't get a response, or they're told that they don't work with people who are incarcerated. So we don't want to add to that frustration. And also be mindful that stamps are expensive. They cost more than they cost for us out here. So people may not always have them. And that's for in order for them to reach out to somebody else. If someone shares that they are having trouble coping, offer things like progressive muscle relaxation, which doesn't require additional materials and can be done without calling attention to the survivor. You can also offer other forms of grounding, mindfulness, or even journal prompts. We recommend creating or adapting handouts that can be included with your response. Okay, and right quick before we go out into other breakout groups, are there other coping skills that people have been able to share with our incarcerated survivors, or ideas for what you might be able to share? If anybody wants to unmute themselves or enter it in the chat, we'd love to hear if you have any other ideas. No, should we just go into our, oh, there we go, 5 senses exercise, yeah.
Oh, I love that one. Thanks for sharing that.
Can we give that information to the pages that you provided? Yes, that's what they're there for. The progressive muscle relaxation. Art is another good one, absolutely. Taylor, I don't know if you have any other ideas.
No, honestly, I love the 5 senses one. That's like my go-to. But yeah, I absolutely love, or like breathing, like guided breathing
Sure.
exercises is really helpful, and like providing step-by-step guidance on how to do it themselves is really helpful. So I think you all mentioned some great ones. And of course, there's more that we didn't get to share too. Jessica jumping in here. Yes, providing some journaling prompts can help with writing too. Absolutely. There's so many different things we can do. It's just making sure that it is accessible for folks who are incarcerated is the key.
Yeah. Little adaptation.
Exactly, little adaptation, but goes a really long way. And I think now we can transition into our next breakout group. So we're going to have y'all back into smaller groups for, I would say, the next 20 minutes. So we're going to work on some practical skills. We have 2 example letters for y'all. We'll put a link in the chat right now that has the letters and the questions that we're hoping to address. So with each small group, we're really just going to have a conversation, go through the letters and go through each of these questions on how we would draft a response to each of these examples. So we will give Marcella just a little bit of time to get us into these breakout groups. And again, in each group, you will have either myself, Edward, or Jessica facilitating this conversation. We'll be in here for quite some time, so I'm hoping that we can really lean into having a nice dialogue with each other. And yeah, looking forward to it. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask your facilitators once we get into those groups.
And I'm going to put everybody in the same groups. So
Lovely.
you have gotten to know each other a little bit, and now you're going to get to know each other even more. The correct link for the prompt is in the chat, so I'd recommend clicking on it now before I send you to the breakout sessions. I'm going to go in and visit you all at some point, but just wanted to make sure you click on that now.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to open the rooms.
Thank you.
And it will stop recording.
So much. That was such good dialogue going on in those groups. I'm sure every other group had really great dialogues going on too. I wanted to leave space now if anybody wanted to share for a few minutes about what they talked about in their group, and also using this space for questions. So I kind of just wanted to open the floor for people to share their experiences or ask any questions that they had.
Yeah, so maybe Taylor, if you could give like a quick summary of what you talked about
gosh.
and then pass it on.
Yes, okay. Yes, we talked about so much, honestly. It's so hard to summarize, but our group made really awesome points about specifically about barriers, which I really appreciate. Someone brought up the idea of if you're raised in a family where you never express your emotions, you're not allowed to talk about your emotions. We don't talk about that, you know, and just shaming emotional expression. So how are you as an advocate through letter writing supposed to encourage them to express emotions when it's so unnatural? So I just really wanted to like celebrate that person bringing that barrier into the mix. I think that's so important to acknowledge, and just reiterates our role as advocates to really just empower them and work with them and meet them where they are and at their pace of, you know, emotional language, emotional intelligence. So I just love that. That was like my one highlight of a barrier that I don't traditionally think of when I think of barriers. So thank you for bringing that one into the space. Edward, was there anything specific from your group going on that you loved?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of it that everybody sort of seems to know how to respond to people. It's just a matter of figuring out how to do that in letters, right? But people mentioned research and being able to find information for people about reporting, for example, and also the importance of building relationships with the facilities that you work with so that you can actually reach out to somebody when there's something that's more urgent.
Yeah, we definitely talked about that and the importance of continually building relationships, which is why we just like repeat that message so often. Jessica, how about your group?
We spent some time talking just about the power of saying the "I believe you, it's not your fault" kind of mantra. And, you know, to not minimize how important reading those words can be, even if there's nothing that you can like physically do to help that person, or nothing that you can change about that person's circumstance, that there's a lot of power in being able to just say that to somebody, and having someone be able to receive that, that it's that touchstone, right? That person, and you can in the letter say like, the next time you're feeling, you know, the same way again, read this letter again, you know, and write back to me, you know, that kind of stuff.
And I'll add, you know, oh, sorry, Marcella.
No, go for it. I'll go after you.
People who are inside are regularly dehumanized, put down, treated like a number. So to get a letter and ignored, just ignored. So to get a letter from somebody who cares and lets them know that there is somebody who cares is really important.
I was just going to say, traditionally, I feel like when we're responding to just anything in writing, we only respond to what's said in the letter, in the email, etc. And there's all these other things that are going on, like you said, Edward, the dehumanization, the lack of believing them. So even if they're not saying that's how they're feeling, it's always important to embed that emotional support instead of like just getting to work and being like, this is the update I got. And this is, and when, especially when most of the updates are disappointing, you've got to weave something in there that's like emotional support and also some resources, and asking them, you know, is there anything that you're doing to take care of yourself? So it gives you an idea of what are some resources that are tied to what they're already doing that sound like something that would work for them. I think I might have seen somebody else unmute themselves. Eliza, was that you or Lisa?
I'm muting me. There's something wrong with my computer.
No worries. Any other thoughts or ideas that folks shared? I have one more thought, but wanted to have space for other folks to share first. And we are going to share some resources later on. So the one thing I did hear Yesenia say is, and I heard this in every group, is that it takes a long time to send a letter and for them to receive it, and then vice versa, right? So sometimes what we can do is work on getting those updates while you're waiting to get a response back, and then send another letter where you're providing those updates, just in case they're wondering like, what's going on here. And then I also heard Yesenia say that she checks in with her PREA contacts about housing changes, or what would it look like to do something like that without sort of disclosing the name of the person who's asking for that request. And so that you can have a sense of how does the process work at that particular agency or institution. And it gives you a sense of like what kind of resistance you might be dealing with if you're
Mhm.
requesting some type of, service that's related to institutional advocacy. So you don't have to disclose anybody's information, but you can kind of say, hey, what does this process look like? So that if you don't know how to explain it in the letter, you're getting it straight from the mouth of the people that are doing the work or that could potentially do the work. Any other things that folks want to add? I just wanted to say that real quick. And I see Edward posted his email in the chat earlier. I will also do that from my own email. And if folks are thinking of questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But for now, I'm going to share some of the resources and pass it back to Taylor.
Perfect. Yes, we'll wrap this up with providing some resources. So our Valor website and Just Attentional International website, along with the PREA Resource Center, has a ton of resources already existing. Really encourage you all to give those a look. If you're thinking of a question, I can almost guarantee there's a response or a resource about it that exists. So feel free to check that out. And then something really cool that JDI and Valor have, we each kind of have our own one-stop shop, really, which is just full of archives of webinars, handouts, trainings, toolkits, really anything that's been done from each agency. There's a one-stop shop about it. So I know that we'll put that in the chat for the next slide about Just Attention Internationals. And then you don't have to create any type of login for that one. And then the Valor US one, you do have to create a login, and we'll have that process up on the slides. Marcel, if you just want to go through just so I can show them what the hub one looks like, just a step-by-step. Yeah, so with the hub, you'll just have to go to the link that's in the chat that I see was posted, create a login, you'll get approved, and then you can explore. And the cool thing about this one specifically, it's not just PREA related, so you can really use this for any part of your agency, pass this along to your teammates. And really, end of the day, we have so many existing resources. If you feel like there isn't a resource that exists, please reach out to us. Our team is very willing to jump on a call, communicate via email, or jump on a Zoom just to talk through whatever challenges you're facing and see what we can pull together. So yeah, tons of resources that exist. And if they don't exist, we'd be happy to work to try and create ones that do. So that is really it. I feel really grateful that you all joined us today. It's like incredible seeing you all. These conversations were so fulfilling. I hope you all took away some tips about letter writing, but I will leave the space for if anybody who's like, oh yeah, I thought of a last minute question, feel free to go ahead, or if any of our other co-facilitators want to say anything.
I'll just echo what Taylor said. Thank you all so much for showing up and for wanting to do right by incarcerated survivors. This is a group of people that not a lot of other people really give a lot of time to, and so I really appreciate you all giving your time to this.
I have a question about letter confidentiality. I think with like CDCR facilities, like there is an option to have a degree of confidentiality. Is there anything like that with like county jails? I know like from jails, like legal mail has a confidential privilege, but is there anything like that for RCCs like that we could set up with jail facilities?
Yeah, that's
So
a really great question. Go for it, Marcella.
I was just going to say that with CDCR, it was a lot easier, quote unquote, easier to be able to set up the confidentiality because they have a statewide sort of like headquarters person that's up at the top saying, y'all have to treat mail as confidential. And they have a poster up that says, if you see this address, an RCC address, and you see this sticker that says 1035.4 privilege and confidential mail, then you should be treating the mail as confidential. Even then, the mail is still often not treated as confidential, and we often get letters from survivors saying my letter was not open in front of me. So that's essentially what the agreement is that mailroom staff have to open the letter in the presence of the recipient to check for contraband. not beforehand, so if the survivor gets a letter that's opened, they know that it's been looked at before they received it. So that's what we're trying to advocate for RCCs with their county jails to do, is to have that sort of individual conversation, since we don't have like oversight committees over every single county jail that's telling them a directive, treat this mail as confidential. So it's really a matter of building the relationship with the county jails, having conversations about why confidentiality is important, and also understanding, some of the complicated feelings that they have around safety and security, and to acknowledge that, and also say, here's an alternative. Sorry, I'm losing my breath. Here's an alternative. You can still check for contraband. We're not saying that we don't want you to do that, but we are asking that you do this in the presence of the recipient and that you don't read the letter. And then you can talk about why that's important, retaliation. We don't want staff knowing about it. This is private information, right? Like, these are people that are talking about trauma, disclosing sexual violence. And so just having continued conversations about that. And Lee, I think that's your name. I had to check your name there. It's good to meet you. Please reach out to us, because I think it's a constant conversation. We've had folks trying to get their mail treated as confidential in county jails for months, if not years. So we kind of need a support group for all of us to have a conversation about this.
But it's possible.
It is
and-
possible.
And it's
It is possible.
established, or it's set while you establish those relationships and set up the services. So
Yes, thank you for ending on a positive note. It is possible. There are some agencies that have set it up, so we can definitely connect you to them. Yeah, thanks for asking that. Any other last questions? Well, if not, this is not the last time we'll speak to you all, hopefully, and not the last time we'll see you all. Like I said, like we've all said, please reach out to us. This is what we're here for. And we're so, so thankful that you showed up and shared some of your questions. I know that it can be a place of vulnerability to talk about the things that you don't know. And that's exactly why we're here for each other. All right. That is it. That's all we've got for you today. Thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your
Thank you so
day. See you
much.
next time.
everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Have a good one.